Something strange is happening, and I don't mean that in the usual internet way, where every minor inconvenience is dystopian and every awkward conversation is trauma. I mean something deeper. More and more people seem unreachable. Not simply angry, not simply misinformed, not simply lonely or bored or politically possessed. Unreachable. You talk to them, and you realize very quickly that the same words no longer mean the same things. The same event does not point to the same reality. The same evidence does not produce the same conclusion. They see one simple fact, one ordinary object, one sentence, one photograph, one human face, and then they drift wildly away from it. Not into imagination, into private fiction. And here is the uncomfortable part. The claim in this title is not based on statistics. I'm not going to show you a chart. I'm not going to pretend this is a clinical diagnosis of civilization. But I suspect that when you read the title, some part of you thought, yes, that's true. And that reaction may say more than any survey could. Because we can feel it. The air has changed. People are angrier, yes. But anger is not the whole story. Beneath the anger is something stranger, a loosening of reality itself, a growing inability to meet each other in a shared world. And I think this has something to do with metaphor. More precisely, with the death of metaphor, which sounds ridiculous, I know. It sounds like the kind of thing a man in a black turtleneck says right before charging $900 for a seminar. But stay with me. Because I think the reason people are losing their minds is not only that they believe false things, it is that they are losing the inner space where meaning can move. For most of human history, our minds were shaped by language. Stories, myths, scriptures, poems, letters, books, speeches, rumors told in kitchens, warnings passed down by grandparents, the whole old machinery of words. To read a sentence is not just to receive information, it is to participate. When you read, your mind has to build the world. If I write, a lonely house stood at the edge of the field, nothing is handed to you, fully finished. You create the field. You imagine the weather. You decide whether the house is threatening or sad or beautiful. You furnish the silence. Text leaves gaps, and those gaps are not flaws. They are where imagination enters. But over the last century, and especially over the last 20 years, we moved from a diet based mostly on words to a diet based mostly on images. Not images as art, not painting, not icons, not the old sacred or symbolic image. I mean the endless, frictionless screen image, the image that explains itself too quickly. The image that arrives already processed, already framed, already captioned, already judged. The image that says, here is the thing, here is what it means, here is how you should feel, and here is the face you should make while reacting to it. And that shift has consequences. Because the major difference between reading a text and staring at a stream of images is this. Text asks the imagination to work. The screen image often does the work for you. It delivers the solution directly. And when something delivers the solution directly, over and over again, the mind grows lazy in a very specific way. It does not merely become less informed, it becomes less layered, less capable of building associations, less capable of holding ambiguity, less capable of wonder. When you read, concepts begin to touch each other. A word calls up an image. The image calls up a memory. The memory touches a feeling. The feeling attaches itself to an idea. Suddenly, a tree is not just a tree. It is childhood, shelter, death, time, family, exile, resurrection, whatever your mind can reach. That is metaphor. Metaphor is not decoration. It is not fancy language sprinkled on top of serious thought like parsley on a bad steak. Metaphor is one of the ways the mind discovers depth. It allows one thing to speak through another. It tells us that the world is not exhausted by its surface. A wall is not just a wall. A road is not just a road. A face is not just a face. This is why children understand metaphors so easily. Before the world is flattened by efficiency, everything is alive with possible meaning. The moon follows the car, the house sleeps, the forest watches, the dark has hands. Then we grow up, and the world becomes useful. This is a chair. Sit in it. This is a phone. Scroll it. This is a person. Categorize them. This is a fact. Weaponize it. Very practical, very modern, very stupid. A healthy mind needs more than usefulness. It needs the ability to move between meanings. It needs room. It needs air. But screen culture shrinks that room. Not because images are evil. Images can be magnificent. Film can be profound. Photography can be truthful. A painting can contain more theology than 100 committee-approved mission statements. The problem is not the image itself. The problem is saturation. The problem is being fed images so constantly that we stop forming our own. The problem is that the imagination, like any faculty, weakens when it is not used. When everything is shown, less has to be imagined. When less is imagined, fewer internal connections are made. When fewer connections are made, metaphor begins to die. And when metaphor dies, reality becomes thin. This is why film and television have always been powerful tools of persuasion. Again, not because they are inherently bad, but because images bypass certain kinds of resistance. A sentence gives you time to disagree. You can pause, you can reread, you can argue with it in your head. An image often arrives like a verdict. Here is the villain, here is the victim, here is the beautiful life, here is the disgusting enemy. Here is what happiness looks like, here is what failure looks like. You may think you are interpreting the image, but very often the image has already interpreted you. It has placed you inside a mood, and once you are inside a mood, reason arrives late, underdressed and slightly embarrassed. This is not new. Every empire has understood it. Every political movement has understood it. Every advertiser with a half-decent tailor has understood it. Images are efficient. They reduce complexity. They compress judgment into a feeling. And when a society consumes too many ready-made images, it begins to lose patience with anything that requires interpretation. That is when disagreement becomes unbearable. Because if reality is supposed to be obvious, then anyone who sees it differently must be lying, stupid, corrupt, dangerous, or possessed. There is no room left for maybe. There is no room left for I see what you mean. There is no room left for the world is stranger than both of us. And that is where madness begins to look normal. But this was only the first phase. The first phase was the replacement of words with images. The second phase is stranger. Now we are surrounded by images that do not come from the world at all. Faces of people who never existed. Photos of events that never happened. Videos of politicians saying things they never said. Historical scenes reconstructed with perfect lighting and absolutely no soul. Dead actors revived. Living people cloned. Beauty generated by machines trained on the stolen ghosts of human taste. You know the images. They look almost real. That is the problem, not fake in the old way. Clumsy, obvious, theatrical, fake in the new way. Smooth, plausible, frictionless. A fake that does not announce itself as fake. A fake that wears the skin of reality. And constant exposure to this does something to us. At first, we become suspicious. Then we become tired. Then we become numb. Eventually, we stop asking, is this real? We ask something worse. Does it matter? That is the moment the floor gives way. Because reality only survives as a shared commitment. It is not enough for reality to exist. We have to remain loyal to it. We have to care whether something happened or did not happen. We have to care whether a face belongs to a human being or to nothing at all. But the more we consume simulations, images with no living source, no original moment, no actual body behind them, the more our minds are trained to accept unreality as just another flavor of content. Chocolate, vanilla, fabricated historical atrocity. Recommended for you. Lovely. Here is the key point. When screen images replace text, they shrink the space of imagination. But when fake images replace real images, they go further. They empty that space out. They do not merely give us too much surface. They give us surfaces detached from anything underneath. And the mind cannot feed on that forever without becoming strange. A real image still has some relationship to the world. A photograph, even a manipulative one, begins with something that stood before a lens. A film scene, even a staged one, contains bodies, light, weather, rooms, objects, voices. There is still resistance from reality. There is still some stubborn grain of the world inside it. But generated unreality has no such loyalty. It is pure appearance. It comes from nowhere and points nowhere. It is all skin. And a mind fed on pure appearance begins to lose its appetite for depth. This is why the modern person can know thousands of facts and still seem profoundly unwise. This is why someone can be online all day and yet have no real contact with the world. This is why so many people now speak in slogans, diagnoses, labels, accusations, and borrowed moral poses. They are not thinking. They are arranging prefabricated images inside their heads. They are not interpreting reality. They are matching reality to templates. And when reality refuses to fit, they do not revise the template. They attack reality. A human being needs wonder. Not entertainment, not stimulation, not novelty. Wonder. Wonder is what happens when the world exceeds your categories. It is the feeling that reality is not finished with you, that a tree may still be more than wood, that a stranger may still surprise you, that suffering may still contain meaning, that beauty may arrive uninvited and make nonsense of your cynicism. Without wonder, the world becomes either boring or threatening, usually both. And a boring, threatening world produces exactly the kind of person we now see everywhere. Restless, resentful, suspicious, easily manipulated, unable to forgive, unable to move on, unable to take revenge, unable to make peace. A person trapped. A person who cannot transform pain into meaning. And that transformation is exactly what metaphor helps us do. Metaphor is how grief becomes winter. How love becomes fire, how betrayal becomes a knife, how hope becomes a door. These are not childish ornaments. They are mental instruments. They allow us to carry experiences that would otherwise crush us. A purely literal mind is not a strong mind. It is a brittle one. It has no shock absorbers. Everything hits directly. Every insult is total. Every disagreement is violence. Every ambiguity is a threat. Every symbol is taken at face value, and every face is treated as a symbol. That is not clarity. That is poverty. The poverty of a mind with no inner distance. Whether we admit it or not, we are dependent on beauty, not luxury. Beauty. And beauty requires depth. Beauty appears when something means more than it has to. A cathedral is not beautiful because it keeps rain off people. A song is not beautiful because air vibrates correctly. A face is not beautiful because the measurements happen to behave. Beauty begins where utility ends. It tells us there is more here. More than function, more than appetite, more than data. More than content. This is why a world without metaphor becomes ugly, even if it is visually impressive. You can have high-resolution ugliness. You can have cinematic emptiness. You can have perfect images that leave the soul completely unfed. In fact, that may be the defining aesthetic of our time. Everything looks polished and nothing feels sacred. Everything glows, nothing illuminates. And people feel this, even if they cannot explain it. They feel that the world has become too obvious, too saturated, too exposed, too available. The mystery has been stripped away. The curtain has been ripped down, and behind it is not truth, but a content management system. A terrible bargain. And yet, there are signs of resistance. You can see it in small ways. Advertisements now say things like, a wall is not just a wall. A board is not just a board. A home is more than a house. Of course, these are ads. Their final goal is still to sell you paint, flooring, furniture, or some Scandinavian object with a name that sounds like a minor respiratory illness. But the instinct is revealing. Even commerce has noticed the hunger. People want things to mean again. They want the world to stop being flat. They want ordinary objects to recover some hidden charge. They want the wall to be memory, the table to be family, the room to be shelter, the road to be destiny. The oldest human desire is not convenience, it is enchantment. We want reality to ask something of us. We want to rediscover it. Not because we are nostalgic fools who want to live in a candle-lit hut and die of a tooth infection, but because a world without hiddenness becomes unbearable. When everything is exposed, nothing is revealed. When everything is available, nothing is precious. When everything is content, nothing is encountered. The answer is not to smash every screen and move to a monastery. Though, depending on your group chats, the monastery may have a point. The answer is also not to pretend technology will politely regulate itself out of spiritual damage. It will not. Machines do not develop restraint because humans look tired. The answer begins much more simply. Read more. Not captions, not takes, not threads, not summaries of summaries written by people who have also not read the thing. Read. Read sentences that make your mind build images again. Read poems badly, then better. Read novels slowly. Read essays you disagree with. Read scripture, myth, history, letters, diaries, anything that forces your imagination to participate rather than merely consume. Second, look at real things, actual faces, actual weather, actual streets, actual rooms, actual trees, which remain undefeated in the ancient art of being trees. Let reality regain authority. Third, protect silence. The mind needs intervals. It needs empty spaces where connections can form. Constant stimulation does not make you more alive. It makes you easier to steer. And finally, practice metaphor. This sounds abstract, but it is simple. Refuse to let the world be only what it is. A meal is not just fuel. A walk is not just exercise. A house is not just property. A conversation is not just an exchange of information. A person is not just a category. Say what things are like. Let one meaning touch another. That is how the inner world becomes spacious again. So no, I cannot prove with a chart that more people are losing their minds. But I can say this. A society that abandons words for images will lose imagination. A society that replaces real images with fake ones will lose trust. A society that loses metaphor will lose depth. And a society that loses depth will eventually lose its grip on reality. Because reality is not held together only by facts. Facts matter. Of course they matter, but facts alone are not enough. We also need shared symbols, shared stories, shared beauty, shared silence, shared metaphors. We need the world to remain partly hidden. We need meanings that are not prepackaged. We need room between things. Room for wonder, room for mercy, room for the possibility that a wall is not just a wall. Because without that room, everything becomes literal, flat, hostile, and insane. And then, yes, more and more people really will seem to be losing their minds. Not because they know nothing, but because nothing means anything anymore.